So thank you once again. Thank you for joining us for day 20. We are getting there. Thank you so much for joining, unlocking your coding superpowers. Day 20 of Code Hero Journey. Thank you so much for joining. If you are connected, type connected. If you are connected, type connected. If you have been with us from the beginning, type 100%. If you have been with us from the beginning, type 100%. If you are not, just type 50%. We understand. And then we know you can catch up. Type 100% if you have been following us. Type 100%. If you are just joining, we joined halfway. Type 50%. Please like the video as you joined. Like the video and let us see where we are. Let us see where we are. Please join and like the video of day 20 of coding superpower. Day 20. We have started day 20. If you are here, type 100%. Let me know that you are still with us. If you are not, will not be able to really proceed. So for day 19, we were able to review our Jdbc concept and see how we are making use of database within the Java application. We reviewed the various SQL queries that can be written. We look at the select, we look at the where clauses, we look at the group by functions for filtering. We also take a look at CRUD operation, that is CRUDE operations that can be performed with SQL. So we look at insert for create, we look at select for get or reading, and then we have delete functions or queries. From there we treated statements. We look at creating statements, and we also look at downside of using a statement in our Jdbc, because it's time consuming and we have to hard code values. Because we have to add code values, that makes it really time consuming and error prone. So we try to avoid that. So we then look into what we call a prepared statement, and we said that prepared statement allow us to write a more granular, clean SQL queries, where we separate the values from the actual queries, and then the values can come in form of the parameters that we will add. So those are what we look into for day 19. So we are now back on day 20. For day 20, we'll be taking a look at before we left in day 19, I told us what our backend structure will look like, and then creating our backend APIs, how the structure should look like, and we look at what API is, application programming interface. We also look at what are different APIs. We look at SOAP, Simple Object Access Protocol, and then SOAP protocol API relies on a web service. We generate a WSDL document in form of XML. Now we also have a REST which we call a representational state transfer, representational state transfer. For this one, the kind of service we create is called a RESTful service. RESTful service, which produces a JSON data, and the JSON is what we call a JavaScript object notation. JavaScript object notation. A JSON data, a JSON file. And then we also take a look at CRUD. In the context of a RESTful service, CRUD translates to post to create, put to update, get to select, and then delete to delete record, head to just fetch the information without fetching, to fetch resource information without fetching the details of the resource. Having said that, we close it by looking at a backend structure. And for backend structure, we said there will be configuration, classes for configuration like database connection, email service, or whatever dependencies. We also look at a repository which connects to the backend. Repository connects to the backend, which is database, email server, MQ server, file system. Then we have services. Services has a repository as dependency, and the services coordinate data that needs to be sent to or from the backend. And then we have the controller, which is one responsible for data connection or the final interface to the client. All right, so having said that, today we'll be taking a dive into, if you look at our address repository, we have address repository, and then we did a DB class. And the DB class, we try so many things to make the DB work because of the MySQL server and things like that. There's a way we can manage all this and still produce our API and get it ready. So something to help us bootstrap this is what we'll be looking at today, which is called Spring Boot. Spring Boot. And in Spring Boot, it's a collection of frameworks. Which we have a Spring Web. Okay, let's start with Spring Jdbc. Spring Jdbc provides API or libraries for database operation. So those connections and all that managed well by the Spring Jdbc module, which makes use of what we call the Jdbc template. And then in the Spring Boot, there is another module or framework that is part of it. We have a Spring Web. For Spring Web, we are dealing with anything that has to do with web services, data gathering or data collection from the web, or response to the web. So that's what the Spring Web does. The Spring Web deals with everything that has to do with the way data is retrieved, pushed to the server. From the Spring Boot collection, we also have something like Spring JPA. JPA means Java persistence annotation. Now, so here, instead of writing our own query to create tables. Instead of writing our own query to create or to select data, like our find all, updates, all those ones can be automatically managed by the Spring JPA or the JPA itself, the Java persistence, where tables and others are annotated. That is, they are marked for auto generation of SQL. Auto generates SQL queries. SQL queries for data persistence, for retrieval, and all that. That's what Spring JPA, does. So these are the combo. Those there are other ones that has to do with maybe core database, that has to do with emails, that has to do with emails, that has to do with aspect oriented service. It has to also do with something that has to do with security, different kind of stuffs also available in the Spring Boot. So each of these are frameworks that are packaged together in what we call the Spring Boot application. So we will start today's coding by creating a basic web service. Our basic web service will make use of a Spring Boot application. So we are going to call it, let's create another application. We will still make use of our student classes that we have written together before, but let's create another project called edu. So instead of database, I don't want us to confuse it with what we have written so far, in case you want to make reference to the Jdbc project. So we'll go back to the root of our project. Let's go back to the root of our project, which is we go back to Bootcamp. We go back to Bootcamp, and then in the Bootcamp we have the database. So we are going to create a new folder, and in this folder let's call it edu, mean edu. That's our project. It's called edu. So cd edu. So we are here in the edu project, and then we do graduate init, let's say y, accept all, and then do a basic. Okay, unknown command for y, let's say graduate init. Let's just say graduate init, and I'm going to select one for basic application. We select one for basic application, and then default we are going to use Groovy like we did before. And what's our project? Our project is edu, which means that we are going to be getting edu.jar. So I press enter for default, and then it generates the simple stuff. So not to waste time, after this is ready, after it has generated it, so after it has generated the file, if you look at the edu, so we have all our files. We have the build or graduate, that is empty. So not to waste time, we'll just take what we have done in here in our database. We want to replicate it here. in our edu. This is edu. We'll paste. So what changes here? Nothing. We have Bootcamp. We have Bootcamp edu. We have the central. Then we have MySQL connector. Then we have the app, which is called bootcamp.edu.app. Okay, good. So now that we have this, we now need to add our dependency. What are the dependencies? Number one, we need to make this new application to tell you that this is a what? This is what will I call it now? A Spring Boot application. So this is a Spring Boot application. Spring Boot application. So once we have this, let's go and set up Spring Boot. Let's go and set up a Spring Boot application for what we have. So basically what we're going to do is that we will update our dependencies to have Spring there. So I'm going to just take say Spring 5. Where is our dependencies? This is our dependencies. So here we have implementation, Bootstrap web, and then test implementation. That is for testing. So we have this, and okay, so we have added this dependencies now. Call it Spring Boot web, but we didn't put the version, so we need to put the version of the Spring Boot. How do we do that? First is that we need to add it to the class part. Let's say we are dealing with Spring Boot version 1.5.8 release. There are different versions, so we can just take any new version. However, so let's work with what we have here. So we have build script, and we are saying we are making use of Spring version 1.5.8. So in the class part, we state the Spring Boot version. This allows it to package the whole jar file together, including all the dependencies. And once we've done that, the next thing is to add Spring Boot to the plugin, to our plugin. Here we have id org.springboot all.spring framework. So org.spring framework.boot. So we add this to our plugin. These are just one-time setup thing that we just need to do. So once we set that up and we have our version, I'll just say 0.1 or 1.0. Let me just leave it like this, 1.0. What else? We have source compatibility and all that we already have. So in our dependency, we have added Spring Boot Starter Web. Spring Boot Starter Web. So having done this, then the next thing is that we just need to have an application. Let's have an application, a simple application that we are going to use. So inside here in the edu, let's create src folder like we did before. So we have src and then we have main, and then we have test. So we have src main, src test. So inside main, let's have a Java folder, and then after that we will now have our bootcamp, that's bootcamp folder, and then we have inside the bootcamp we have edu. So inside the edu now we want to create our entry points. The entry point here, let's just call it app.java like we had before. So we had app.java. So this is our class. Now basically, since we have done this, the next thing is that we need to tell Java that this class is a Spring Boot, is a web application backend that we are building. So what do? Is that we use annotation. Annotation is a kind of markup or a label that you add to a file, and then once you do that, automatically all the codes that have been written that needs to execute will now be executed. So the annotation is a way of importing file, from another sources into your current application that have been built, compiled and built. It's different from the port, using the import command. So having said that, let's quickly mark this as a Spring Boot application. So we have a public static. Don't forget that for every entry class it must have one main method, public static void main, then string args, main string args. So once we do this, and then we can now say, okay, since we have this now, then we just call a Spring application to run our current class. So we just say Spring application dot run app dot class, then passing the current argument to it, but we need to import this Spring application. So let's import the Spring application. The Spring application. We import this Spring framework dot boot. Application. So we import the Spring Boot application, Spring Boot application, then auto configure. So we try to import the Spring application and then auto configure the Spring Boot application. So once we do this, we can try and compile. Compile. Let's see. gradu clean build, and this is the package is bootcamp.edu. So let's try and build. It fails, so let's try and fix the error. Okay, line 21. Let's see. Line 21. Springboard, org.springboard, spring org.spring framework.boot, org.spring framework.boot. Let's look at that. In our repository, we have Maven Central, right? Maven Central repository, Maven Central. What else? We have Springboard 1.5.8. I think our plugins are correct now. Apply plugins, application. Plugin ID org.spring framework not found. Org.spring framework.boot not found. Let's try and fix that. Springboard version org.spring spring framework. Not found. Apply plugin. Java Eclipse. Okay. I can say if this one is not found. Let's use apply plugin then. Let's just apply plugin. Older version. Okay, so with this, it will download the jar files, and then in line 5, fail to apply plugin boot. Line 25. Line 25. Line 25, apply plugin boot. Let's see. System org.framework.boot not found. We'll probably have to look at a latest version. Let's look at the latest version of Spring Boot. So you can just go to a website. Let's look for Spring Boot's latest version. Java 8 Gradu. So let's do Java 8 graduate. I'm trying to check. You can go to docs.spring.io, doc.spring.io, and you should be able to find the Spring version. Okay, Spring version. Otherwise, we use the Spring initializer. We can use the initializer. So I'm going to try. Let's try the Spring Boot ID Spring Boot version, and then apply plugin. Spring Boot framework. Let's try this. So let's try that. Graduate clean build. So unknown, okay, looks better now. So unknown class name, yeah, because unknown class name, line 39. Okay, so I'm going to comment that out now. What else do we have? Let's keep digging. Let's keep fixing. What is it now? Could not resolve all files in the class part. Okay, in the class part, let me do this first. Let me do this. Could not find Spring Boot starter web. Spring Boot starter web. Let's see. Implementation Spring Boot, org.springboot, org.springboot, org.springboot implementation. We should have org.springboot starter web, org.springboot starter web. What else is missing? Let's take a look. From our dependency tree. In the dependency tree, we have ID Java. Okay, I think we just need to apply this. Apply plugin. Let's try this. Apply plugin. Spring management. Spring management. So we have a lot of compatibility issue. We have a lot of compatibility issue. Spring Boot. Let's see. Source compatibility. Doesn't see anything on its targets. Something compatible with Java 8. Okay, what version of Java do we have? Check your system And let's try to find out what version of Java, Java version. Okay, this is Java 11. I have Java 11. Let's try Java 11. 11.0. Let's see whether it's compatible. Java 11.0. 11.0. Java 11.0, Java 11, and what we have is not compatible. So let's say, okay, this is compatible with Java version 17. So let's downgrade Spring Framework for Spring Boot plugin for Java 17. Spring Boot plugin for Java 17 for Java 7. I mean Java 11 rather. Let's quickly Google that for Java 11. Spring Boot for Java 11. I think requires 2.1.3. Let's try 2.1.3. 2.1.3. Let's see that version of Spring Boot. Okay, there was no Spring Boot version 2.1.3 was not found in the central repository. Okay, say Java 11. Okay, Spring and Spring Boot version. Current is 6.11. I'm trying to search now. Java 17 as minimum. Okay. 2 provided. I'm trying to get a Spring Boot version that is compatible with the one that is on my system. Spring Boot we have to stick to, you know, 2 series releases. Let's see what we have in Spring Boot. Maven Spring Boot 2. 2.7. That is 2.7.2. Let's try 2.7.2. 2.7.2. 7.2. You can refresh your browser if you are not seeing what I'm doing. Okay, looks clean. So since it looks clean, that means that it's built successfully. And what it does most times is that all our, when you were using Jdbc, we have to download the jar file. So all the dependence jar files should be downloaded by the Spring framework automatically. So now that we have this, we can return into our application. We can return to our application where we have this. Then we just need to annotate this one. Say at Spring Boot application. So we annotate it as at Spring Boot application. So I think with that we can let's run build again. Gradual clean build. So if we do that, I think we should have let's see the build and the leaves. We have edu.io.jar, say java jar edu -1.0.jar. We run this. Sorry, I didn't specify the full class part. So, and that is inside build /leaves /edu.jar. So if you look at this now, automatically a web server is created for us. A web server is created for us. And in the web server, you can see the Spring logo. Later, we can look at how we can customize this to show our own application name. All right, so the server started and then is listening at a particular port. The next line says that our application is bootcamp.edu.app, and Tomcat server we have 8080. That means on port 8080. It's running on port 8080, localhost, and then is running internal web server, which is Tomcat web server. In the olden days, you will have to deploy Tomcat separately and put your jar file there, and we can open say localhost, and let's see, let's see the web. So we can open localhost now. Say localhost column 8080. Now, so with this now, we get 404 because there is nothing in the index. There is nothing at the index page. This is just a blank application. This is a blank application, and that's why we are seeing white label error page. This application has no mapping for error, or so you are seeing this as a fallback. So the good thing is that we have a web application up and running. A web application up and running, though is doing nothing. It is doing nothing. It is doing nothing. So we can we can now do like a path that will begin to show what we are doing. We can show a part of what we are doing. Currently, this is our web. The local host means that the web server is running on our system. Local host means that the web server is running on our system, and that can refresh your screen if you are not seeing what I'm doing. You see, the web server is running on our system. So, and that's why it is referred to as local host. It's referred to as local host. It's referred to as local host. And then there is an entry port where it is serving the files. And this entry port is called port 8080 based on our application. So let's go back to the application. Let's now do something more meaningful. Let's do something more meaningful with our application. So we are going to return to the code. Let's return to the code so we can do something more meaningful. I'm going to stop this service. So Control C rather. We use that to stop the service. Let's come back to this. Let's come back to this. Let me move this one a bit down. Okay, let's move it back down. Now, like I told us, I made mention of the back end structure. We have the configuration, we have the repository, we have the services, and we have the controller, which is the one that exposes the web content, to the public. The one that exposes the web content to the public is the controller class. So we can even start from controllers. Let's make some dummy controllers. What this controller will just do is to just display less, maybe static data. So we'll work with static data to just display static data. We can do that, right? We can do that. So all we need to do is that let's say let's just map this one. Where are we? In our app, let's create a method now. Say public string. This one is just to return a string, and then let's call it index, which takes no parameter. And this index, we're saying should return a string. Let's say return. What string should it return? They'll say welcome. Welcome Bootcamp 1.0. Bootcamp 1.0. So we want to return this string. But since we are returning this string, we need to do what we call mapping of our URLs. So we'll say request mapping this. We annotate this, say at request mapping. Now what we are simply doing here is that since we put slash, we are saying that when no other path, what is called path? Path is a directory for resource locator on our page. For example, look at youtube.com. You have youtube.com. youtube.com, and then you have slash watch. So if you take a look at this one, the part here starts from after the first forward slash, then you can have slash. Those are called parts. That is the virtual work directories. We have youtube.com. If you type youtube.com without slash watch, this will take you to the default YouTube page where you see all kind of videos on your home page. That goes to home page. Now when you put slash watch, it means that take me to a particular video that I want to watch. So for now we want to do slash nothing. That will mean our default. And slash watch, we are saying that maybe when we go to slash watch, it should give us a text display, something like unlocking your coding superpower. Unlocking your coding superpower, day 20 of Code Hero journey. All right. So, but if there is no slash watch, we want to have something like welcome, and then say Bootcamp 1.0. This is what we want to display. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. So since we have this, in our index page, we will do this. Let's create another mapping now. So we'll create another mapping, resource mapping, and in this mapping we want to say slash watch. So I'll call this method watch, and the data type is returning is a string. Later we'll look at different data types and things like that. So we have what? We have request, mapping, and then we have watch, slash nothing, and then slash watch. So we are creating two directory. We are creating through endpoints. Let's call it that way. To endpoints. Then all we need to do is that we need to first mark this application, say as a controller. We'll look at separating concern. Let's say controller at rest controller. At rest controller, let's see if I can import those two. It's really web.bind the spring framework .web.bind .annotation, I think rest controller. So we have rest controller. We have the same thing for, say, request mapping. So we have at request mapping, and then we have REST controller. So let's take a look at what we have done. Let's build again. Gradual clean build. Okay, so let's fix error. So we are having request mapping, not request mapping. Okay, in the bind. Okay, good. So built successfully. Then let's run it again. All right. So if we look at it again, we have that our Spring application has started, and after it has started, it's still running on port 8080. And then let's see. Let's see what we can get now after we have mapped. After we have mapped, you can refresh your screen. So let's see what we can get now. If you are there, you can like the video as you're watching currently. Like the video. So we are here, and then if we refresh again, you will see now that we are having on the screen, welcome to Bootcamp, welcome to Bootcamp 1.0, welcome Bootcamp 1.0, welcome Bootcamp 1.0. You can see, you can refresh your screen if you are not seeing well, or probably do a kind of adjustment and bring it down. Okay. So you should see what I'm seeing now. You should see the Bootcamp 1.0. So let's say we want to ensure that this, let's go to watch, so we can say /watch. If everything is fine, that should take us to the watch page. /watch. So for watch, we didn't get what is desired. So let's see why. Let's see why we are not getting the desired on the watch. /watch at request mapping /watch. Okay, I think it's correct. I think I was returning something else. Okay, so I will try again now. Let's clean build and then run again. So we refresh. You can see for watch, unlocking your coding superpower. If you don't put watch, we should see just welcome. We should just see just welcome. So that is how controller we have managed to build a server that is serving with this one. Anybody who has access to the URL anywhere in the world can connect to it and see the same thing, because you already have a server that is running. they can watch, they can, just browse this one. But having said that, this is not neat. We just do something very quick for us to appreciate. Now, to make it look better, the controller class should be in another package called controllers. Should be in another package called controller. So we'll create a new package called controller inside the edu. Let's call it controller. So in the controller, let's have our main controller. Let's call it index controller. Index controller. We create a class index controller. So we are creating a class called index controller, and we can now say that this controller, we can mark it as a controller. We can edu, this should be bootcamp.edu.controller, right? So we have index controller, and for the index controller we have say like our normal class, public controller, public index controller, rather index controller. So we have index controller, and for the index controller we have what? For the index controller we will have those two methods that we want. So we mark this class as what? As a controller. We mark this class as what? REST controller. So after mapping it as REST controller, let's just move these ones, because this class is not doing more than starting the application. It's also creating the endpoint. That is not a single responsibility. It needs to have what we call a single responsibility. So we move the controller away and the request mapping away from here, and take it to the controller class, right? So we don't need this. So the app class is clean. Again, the app class is clean, doing only to start the application. And once it starts the application, because we have marked this application as Spring Boot, it will look for all the Spring Boot related annotations which we have here, and then start it. So I'm going to stop this server again. I'm going to start the server again. Let's try and compile whether it will compile. Otherwise we'll fix the issue. So it's compiled, and then we can now say let's just run it. We just say java build /leaves/edu.jar, and you see that it's still bootstrap correctly. And if we go back to the front end and refresh, we will see be okay. Now let's create other controllers. Let's have something like student controllers. Let's call it student controllers. Student controller. So student controller.java. Student controller.java. And here we have our student controller. So public student controller. And then so let's add various endpoints. For the controller, we want to create students, so we want something like creating a student, say public string get all, here. If we do this, we want it to return all students. We want it to return all students. So for now, we can just say what are all the students that we need. Let's say it should return, say, 1 James Taylor, maybe new line, let's say new line, new line 2, Kaboki Kobito, and say, and then 3 tester autonomous. So let's just say this is it, and then we can now map this as a result or a resource, because as it is now, if we try to find our students, we will still be getting the same bootstrap. So we can just say, okay, find all. For find all, return a string, and then this is the path. When we say request mapping, and for this request mapping, let's say slash students. So anytime we call slash students, we want it to return all the students' name. And then if we have a student ID, we want it to return a single student. Then we can say get student. This one, the first one, instead of say get all, I can just say get students, plural. Then we have another one, get student, and then slash path. And what is the path? And in this path, you can okay, so sorry, I've not been showing the code. Okay, so here we are creating a new class called a student controller, because we want to move all the endpoints, the classes that generate the endpoints, to a package which we call controller. So we have index controller which display the default data when you go to the web page. So next is that we want to look at what if a student is just called with say an ID. Let's say start student that ID. Let's see, ID, and then here we can see it at path param. Then you can put at path param ID, path parameter, ID in the students. That will give you students with a particular path and a particular particular ID. That will be for students, right? Okay, so let's probably build this and test. Let's build this and test. So we have we just say student ID, and then here at I think we'll have at param, and then string. This at param will state that it's an ID that we are expecting, and then string ID. So when we have this, let me see, at param CID, and I think I have to view this. So there are different kind of parameter actually. We have a parameter for querying, and then we have parameter for paths. Here, if we have something like student, let's say slash something like slash students slash 1, that means that we are trying to get a student with an ID 1. This 1 becomes the what we call path variable. Path variable. Now when we have to do this, say slash students, then question mark ID equals to 1. That is path parameter or query parameter. Query parameter. Query parameter. We also have path parameter here. So we have path variable called ID. So this will be path variable. It will be path variable, and our variable is string ID. Let me import this. Why is it not? Anyway, import org.spring framework web.bind annotation rest controller, and then we also have request mapping. So we have a request. We have request mapping. So I'll talk about path variables, and then we can have a path, parameter, and then we can also determine what kind of response that we want. But for now, let's just deal with how would I put it now? Let's just deal with normal textual response. Normal textual response. Trying to get the path variable. Import path variable, import let's see, where are we? Annotation parts, variable. Now, so we have students, which map to get students, and then we have a students slash ID, which map to get students by ID. Let's try and build this, and if there is any problem, we'll fix it as usual. Path variable. So we have built, we run, and then let's go back to the web to text what we have done. Let's try and test what we have done. Let's try and check what we have done. So if we refresh now, we see that we have the Bootcamp as the default page, and then from there we go to slash watch. After the watch, we can go check the students. Okay, so as we see now, slash students was not correctly mapped. So let's look at why slash students was not correctly mapped. Okay, if you look at the code, you will see one issue here. If you look at the code, there is one issue here, and the issue here is that look at the controller. The controller was not annotated as a controller. Because it wasn't annotated, Spring Boot will not detect it. Spring Boot will not detect it, so we can say REST controller as REST controller, and then we can compile again. Let's build again and then run the service. After running the service, then we can go to the web to check again. Let's check again from the web. So if we refresh students, we can see that we have the list of the students. We have the list of the students as it is displayed. We can even say that, okay, instead of this one, let's put a break tag since BR. Let's try a break tag. Okay, so I'll build again. And refresh the browser. So if we refresh the browser, we should have the web page being displayed. Looks like We are not seeing this well. Okay, so that's it. That's it for students. Let's say we just say /1. You will return, supposed to return 1 student. So here we can go back to our code now and say /student should return a single student. So here this should return, say, return James Taylor. It should return James Taylor. So we recompile. So we compile and then run again. And then check again from our front end. That's give us students, right? So we can refresh. Here we have 1 student. If we remove the 1 part, it should give us list of students. If we remove a student, it should give us Bootcamp. And if we put wash, it should give us another page. So that is our server responding different way. I need us to end this class in another 8 minutes. Let's end this in 8 minutes so that we can be fresh. Tomorrow we will continue part 2 of day 20. Tomorrow let's continue part 2 of day 20. Now you will see that, so we have students, we have guest student, but these are static values. These are static values. We need to make this one to talk to database. How do we make it to talk to database? We will need to configure our backend. We need to configure our backend to talk to the backend and things like that. And again, I will do something very interesting here. Is that we will remove the service that we have written before. Let's take the service that we have before. The service here. Bring it to our edu. In edu we create a service, say service, and we put this in the service, in the student service, isn't it? A student service requires a repository. Now in creating our controllers, how many controllers are we going to create? So when our service is starting, how do we ensure that there is only 1 DB instance that is created? To make use of what we already have. We will do something very interesting. So let's go to the repository. And in this repository, this is where we are going to instantiate our DB just for or to just maintain order. Let's go back to here. We have repository. So when we are doing our part B tomorrow, we will clean this up and let Spring Boot to configure the repository by itself. So I will take the the stuff in our DB here. So DB is in the DAO. So let's copy this DAO and put it in DAO here. What else do we need to copy? We have controller, we have a repository, we have service, we have VAO. So this VAO, value access object, let's bring it back here. And then I'm going to just rename this one as model. Let's call it model, which means every other places need to make use of the model. So here address will now be bootcamp.edu.model. Same thing with students. So anywhere we need students, we do that. Okay, so this is since they're in the same package, they should be in the same package. Address is in the same package with student repository. All the VAO will now be model. Let's say model. Let's quickly do this. Let me see. I think I wasn't showing the code. Sorry about that. So we go to our code. In our code, so we have the model. So we have model. So we have the model, we have the DB, and then in our service, we call it the service. So in our service, we are going to instantiate a DB here. So we're going to instantiate DB, final DB equals to new DB, right? And then we will pass this DB here. So that's basically that. Our app is annotated. Our app will call controller. Let's look at student service. Okay, here, so this will be model. So we have modeled our classes. We have the DB, which is supposed to start once. Okay, so let's now our controller this time around, when we find student, we'll take a look at the student here. We will now inject file now, student service, say student service. So we have student service. Let's create student service here in our controller, in our student controller. So this dot student service equals to student service, and we have this student service. So we have student service, so we just need to import student service. Let's import student service. Let's see, import bootcamp dot service dot student service. So we have imported student service, we have the REST controller, student controller, and then here we'll return this dot student service dot find all. We'll call the find all, and there here, let's say the ID is integer, so we'll return here this dot student ID. In the student so this will be list student, let's see, student, and then this should return a single student. Okay, so this will be student service dot find by ID. I will pass the ID. So let's keep it as short as this. Let's keep it as short as this. We then need to do what? We need to import the list. Import java.util.list. And we compile. Let's compile again. All right, and fix the problem. Student service does find by ID. Where is student service? Find out student service. Student service is in service. Let's look at the bootcamp.edu.service, and this service as okay, there is no method cost, so we just say public list student. Let's do this, find all, and this should be able to return all the students, which we actually did here. So return this is student ID, these are students, the find all. How about find by ID? This should give us find by ID, integer ID, and then we can save. This will be find by ID, like we have written before, and this will be a student object. Student object find by ID. Find by ID. Let's try this again. And fix the bug. Part able student list students. Okay. Model students java.util.list. Student controller. Let's look at student controller. Student controller. Okay, so we need to import students here. say model and then dot students. Does this work? Yeah, so it's built correctly. Let's try and run it. Okay, so we need to annotate now. So we have service. This needs to be annotated with @service for it to be discovered @service. So that would be import org.spring framework dot the web dot annotation dot service. I think that should be that index controller the web dot bind. Okay, let's see, where is the student? Okay, let me try and build it again. @service let's see for the service mapping. For our service mapping, I'm trying to get maybe we'll go to use context. Probably use string context. We'll use a string context for the service. Trying to bring this up. Okay. I will just do Spring Boot was stereotype. Stereotype. String framework does stereotype. Okay, so it's built, and then we can just try and run again. Did it break? Okay, no. And then we can go back to our web and check. Let's check from here. Okay, so if we do that, this over students, great. So we can see the JSON data being produced for students. We have student with student ID 1. We have student with student ID 3. Let's look at student with ID 3. Say /3. We can see that returns JKEK this, the JSON data for that very student. So we are going to stop here. We are going to stop here and continue tomorrow. We'll review that. Then we'll now look at how to send data. Now we are just using the get to get the data. We get all, we get single. Let's look at how we can create a new student by submitting a form to the backend. All right. Thank you so much for listening today. See you again next class.